Most people will spend their entire lives believing every single thought their mind throws at them. They'll wake up each morning already carrying the weight of old doubts, regrets, and fears, as if these thoughts were facts carved into stone. But here's the truth that so many never hear. You are not your thoughts. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a restless monkey, always jumping from branch to branch, never satisfied, never still. And if you don't learn to guide it, it will lead you into confusion, anxiety, and constant suffering. But the moment you begin to question the stories in your head, you discover something powerful. There is a calm, steady awareness beneath all that noise. A part of you that has always been free. Today I'm going to share how you can take back control of your mind and stop letting your thoughts run your life. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you're going to learn practical ways rooted in Buddhist wisdom to quiet the mental chatter, find clarity, and finally feel at peace with yourself. I promise you, every part of this conversation matters, so don't skip ahead or you'll miss the insights that could completely shift the way you see yourself. And if you appreciate the heart and effort we put into making these videos for you, if you feel this message is something the world needs a little more of, there's a simple free favor I'd love to ask. Just tap that subscribe button. It helps this channel grow and keeps these teachings alive for everyone who's searching for a little more peace in a noisy world. It's almost unsettling when you realize how many thoughts drift through your mind in a single day. Some mornings you wake up and it feels like 1,000 different voices are already chattering in your head before your feet even touch the floor. One is telling you to hurry, another is worried about something you said yesterday, another is already doubting if you're good enough. Most people never stop to question where these thoughts come from or whether they deserve any attention. They just let them swirl around, shaping their mood, decisions, and sense of self-worth. The Buddha often spoke about this mental clutter, describing the mind as a wild elephant that needs training. If you never learn to hold the reins, that elephant will trample your peace without hesitation. When you start to see your thoughts more like visitors instead of unshakable truths, everything changes. Imagine your mind as a house. Would you really let any stranger wander in, track mud on the floor, and tell you how to feel? Yet that's exactly what we do with thoughts. We don't question them, we don't set any boundaries, we simply accept them, and over time, they become part of the furniture. This is why so many people feel exhausted or stuck. Their mental space has become so crowded with unfiltered noise that they can't hear their own wisdom anymore. Buddhist teachings encourage us to become aware, to step back and watch the mind without getting pulled into every storyline. The next time you catch yourself believing something like, "I'm not capable," or "I always mess things up," pause. Ask yourself, is this thought actually helpful? Is this rooted in reality or just a tired old habit? Because thoughts are not commands. They are not prophecies. They are simply passing phenomena like clouds drifting across the sky. You don't have to follow everyone. This practice isn't about pretending that everything is wonderful all the time. It's about taking responsibility for what you allow to stay in your mind. When you choose which thoughts deserve space and which ones need to be released, you start reclaiming your power. It feels unfamiliar at first, maybe even uncomfortable, but it's the beginning of true freedom. You become the gatekeeper of your own mind, and slowly, with compassion and discipline, you create an inner space that feels clear, steady, and strong. That's where peace lives. It's strange how easily we trust the voice in our head, even when it has been wrong so many times. Think about it. How many moments in your life have you held back or felt ashamed because of something your own mind whispered? The Buddha called these thoughts mental formations, the stories and assumptions we build over years of experience, pain, and habit. They seem so convincing because they wear the mask of familiarity. But familiarity doesn't mean truth. It just means you've rehearsed the same script over and over until it feels real. One of the most powerful shifts you can ever make is learning to recognize when your mind is telling you a story that doesn't serve you anymore. A thought can show up like a quiet little comment. You're not ready. People will judge you. You've failed too many times to try again. And before you know it, you're nodding along, accepting every word as fact. But you have to remember that your thoughts are not commandments. They're not ultimate truths written in stone. They're more like passing clouds drifting across a vast, open sky. The Buddha taught that suffering is often created not by the events themselves, but by the way we cling to our perceptions of them. If you never pause to question whether a thought is helpful or even accurate, you end up living in a prison of your own making. Whenever a thought makes you feel smaller, heavier, or more afraid, treat that as your cue to stop and look closer. Where did this belief come from? Is it something you learned as a child? Did it grow out of a painful memory or a single moment of failure? Just because you've carried it for years doesn't mean it deserves to stay. You can observe it without reacting. You can notice it without letting it drive your decisions. Over time, this practice of gentle investigation becomes second nature. You'll start to feel a subtle space between you and your thoughts, and in that space, you find freedom. You know that moment when you get an idea that lights you up inside. Maybe you feel a spark of excitement to start something new, or you finally feel ready to speak up about something that matters to you. For a second, your heart beats faster and you think, this could really change things. But almost just as quickly, the old familiar voice of fear starts whispering in your ear. It lists every reason you shouldn't act. It tells you you're not prepared, that you'll fail, that other people will judge you. And before you even realize what happened, that spark has dimmed, replaced by hesitation and regret. The Buddha often spoke about this moment, how the mind clings to comfort and familiarity, even when it costs you your own growth. He reminded us that nothing grows in the safety of indecision. When you feel inspired to take action, you have a very small window of time before your brain tries to talk you out of it. Your mind thinks it's protecting you from embarrassment, disappointment, or discomfort. But what it's really doing is locking you in the same old patterns you say you want to leave behind. If you wait too long, if you give your thoughts time to build a case against your courage, you'll almost always decide to stay where you are. That's why it's so important to move quickly, not recklessly but decisively. When you act before fear has a chance to settle in, you interrupt the cycle. You prove to yourself that you are stronger than your doubts. You teach your mind that it no longer gets the final say in whether you move forward. This doesn't mean you have to jump headfirst into massive life changes overnight. It can be as simple as sending the message you've been avoiding, signing up for the class you keep thinking about, or standing up for yourself in a conversation. The Buddha said, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply begin. Even one small action shifts your energy from fear into momentum. Over time, these little acts of courage add up. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who hesitates, but as someone who follows through. And in that space between the thought and the action, you reclaim the freedom to create the life you truly want. Some days you wake up and everything just feels heavy. Maybe you didn't sleep well, maybe something stressful is happening, or maybe it's just one of those mornings when you feel low for no clear reason. It happens to everyone. But here's where most people get stuck. They think that because they feel unmotivated, it means they are unmotivated. So they spend the whole day dragging themselves around, convinced they can't do anything worthwhile until their mood magically improves. The Buddha taught that all mental states arise and pass away, just like waves on the ocean. They are temporary. They don't define you. But when you let your mood be in charge of your choices, you give away your power to something that never lasts anyway. Think about how many times you've delayed something important because you just didn't feel like it. Maybe it was starting a new habit, working on a project, or having a conversation you were avoiding. Your feelings told you to wait, so you waited. But waiting didn't make you feel better. It just kept you stuck. This is the quiet trap most people never see. Believing your mood has to be right before you act. The reality is, if you only move when you feel perfect, you'll rarely move at all. The Buddha often reminded his followers that discipline, not emotion, is the foundation of a peaceful mind. It's about showing up for your life no matter what the weather is like inside your head. You don't need to pretend your emotions aren't there. You don't have to slap a smile over sadness or force excitement when you feel tired. But you can gently say to yourself, I feel this, but I'm not going to let it decide my whole day. When you practice this, you start to build a deeper respect for yourself because you prove that you are bigger than any passing mood. Even a small action counts. Maybe you write for 10 minutes instead of an hour. Maybe you go for a short walk instead of skipping exercise completely. Maybe you answer just one email instead of ignoring all of them. These little choices add up. Each time you act in spite of your mood, you grow stronger. You build a kind of quiet confidence that isn't shaken by every wave of emotion. That's the heart of real mental control, knowing that your mood is just a visitor, and you are the one who chooses whether it gets to lead. There's something most people don't realize until their mind feels so heavy they can hardly think straight. Every little distraction you allow into your life piles up. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal to check your phone every few minutes or say yes to conversations that drain your energy. But over time, all those small interruptions become a thick fog that clouds your thinking and steals your peace. The Buddha often reminded his followers that clarity is the foundation of wise action. He taught that when your mind is cluttered, your decisions are reactive instead of intentional. You start feeling overwhelmed, not because life is truly unmanageable, but because you've allowed too much noise to fill your head. Think about it like this. Your mind is like a clear pool of water. Every unnecessary distraction is a handful of dirt thrown in. 1 or 2 handfuls won't make much difference. But if you keep allowing them, the water becomes muddy, and soon you can't even see the bottom. That's when you lose touch with what matters most. You stop hearing your own inner voice and start following the opinions and expectations of everyone else. And that's when you feel scattered, restless, and strangely disconnected from yourself. The solution is not to run away from the world or pretend you don't care. It's about protecting your mental space with the same respect you'd give to your home. You wouldn't invite people in to track mud all over your floor, so why let thoughts, habits, or people drag clutter into your mind? Buddha taught that mindfulness isn't just sitting quietly with your breath. It's learning to recognize what belongs in your awareness and what doesn't. When you say no to gossip, mindless scrolling, or commitments that drain you, you're not being rude or selfish. You're making space for clarity. It can feel uncomfortable at first to set these boundaries. People might not understand why you're less available or why you're choosing simplicity over constant busyness. But the freedom you gain is worth it. When your mind is clear, you think more creatively. You feel more grounded. You make choices that align with your values, not your fears. Even a few minutes of silence or a conscious decision to step back from distraction can be life-changing. It reminds you that you are in charge of what you allow in. The clearer your mind, the stronger your sense of purpose. And that is a gift no one else can give you. You have to claim it for yourself. There's something almost magnetic about the easy path. It looks gentle, it feels safe, and it rarely asks much from you. But the Buddha warned that chasing comfort without question is like wrapping yourself in a soft blanket that eventually becomes a prison. Most people spend their entire lives choosing what feels pleasant over what will make them stronger. And then they wonder why they feel so unprepared when life challenges them. It's not that they aren't capable. It's that they never practiced facing discomfort. They never trained their mind to stand steady when things get hard. Think about it for a moment. Every time you decide to stay quiet when you know you should speak, you weaken your confidence. Each time you choose to skip the effort, telling yourself you'll get to it tomorrow, you chip away at your own discipline. And when you pick the easy option again and again, you create a pattern of avoiding the very experiences that could build your resilience. The Buddha described this as the path of craving, always reaching for short-term relief and never seeing the long-term cost. Comfort feels good in the moment, but it quietly steals your belief in yourself. It makes you doubt whether you can handle real challenges because you haven't given yourself a chance to prove otherwise. On the other hand, choosing what strengthens you, even when it's uncomfortable, is an act of self-respect. It's how you teach your mind that you can trust yourself to follow through. When you do the thing you've been avoiding, whether it's a difficult conversation, a commitment to your health, or learning a new skill, you start to feel a different kind of energy. It's not the fleeting pleasure of comfort. It's a deep, steady pride that comes from knowing you didn't shrink when things felt heavy. The Buddha encouraged his followers to meet their own resistance with curiosity, not judgment. He knew that the more you turn toward what scares you, the less power fear has over you. There's something most people never want to admit out loud. We all have that one thing we keep avoiding. Maybe it's a conversation you know you need to have, or a habit you've been meaning to change, or a project that feels so big it terrifies you just to think about it. You tell yourself you'll get to it tomorrow or next week, or when life calms down. But the truth is, you're not really waiting for the perfect moment. You're hoping you'll never have to feel the discomfort of facing it. The Buddha often spoke about this human tendency to cling to comfort and familiarity, even when it keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering. He reminded us that real freedom comes when you have the courage to look directly at what scares you, instead of turning away. Think about how many times you felt that tension in your chest whenever the thought of that hard thing came up. It's like your whole body says, "Not now, I'm not ready." And so you distract yourself with smaller, easier tasks, cleaning the house again, scrolling your phone, doing anything that feels productive without actually moving you forward. But if you're honest, you know this is just a way to avoid the very thing that would help you grow. You don't have to shame yourself for this. It's simply the mind's protective reflex, trying to shield you from discomfort. The Buddha taught that the mind is skilled at inventing excuses, weaving stories to keep us in the illusion of safety. But every time you avoid the work that matters, you feed that illusion and shrink your own confidence a little more. It's so important to ask yourself, gently but truthfully, why you keep running from the things that matter most. Is it because you're afraid to fail? Afraid to be seen trying and not getting it perfect? Or maybe it's because you're so used to staying small that you don't trust yourself to handle something bigger. When you bring awareness to these hidden fears, you start to loosen their grip. You don't have to know exactly how to fix everything. You just need to stop pretending you don't see it. The Buddha encouraged his followers to meet each moment as it is, with clarity and compassion. So the next time you feel that urge to run from the hard thing, pause, take a breath. Remind yourself that growth is never comfortable, but it is always worth it. You have carried the weight of avoidance long enough. You deserve the relief that comes from finally facing it, one small step at a time. There's something unsettling about those moments when your mind starts to spin faster than you can keep up. One thought triggers another, and suddenly you're not just thinking, you're spiraling. It feels as though you're stuck inside a storm you can't see but can definitely feel. Your chest tightens, your breath goes shallow, and your body gets tense, as if bracing for something terrible to happen. The Buddha called this the restless mind, that part of us that clings to fears and invents stories about what might go wrong. And in those moments, it's so easy to believe every fearful prediction, every worst-case scenario your mind throws at you. But you don't have to. You don't have to keep feeding that cycle until you're completely drained. One of the most important things you can do when your thoughts are racing is to remember that you don't have to solve everything in that exact moment. The mind tries to convince you that unless you figure everything out right now, something bad will happen. But that urgency is an illusion. It's your mind's way of trying to feel safe by controlling what cannot be controlled. When you notice this happening, take it as a signal, not a command. It's a signal to pause. Just like the Buddha would sit beneath the Bodhi tree in silence, you too can create a little space between yourself and the chaos. Take a slow breath. Exhale even more slowly. Feel the ground under your feet. These small actions may sound simple, but they are powerful. They break the momentum of panic and bring you back to the present moment. You don't need to chase down every thought to calm your mind. In fact, the more you argue with your worries, the stronger they get. What helps instead is stepping back and observing. You can say to yourself, I see that my mind is busy right now. That's okay, this will pass. When you stop fighting your thoughts, they lose their grip on you. You create a sense of spaciousness inside, and from there clarity begins to return. Remember, you are not the storm. You are the sky that holds the storm. The clouds of fear and doubt may gather, but they are temporary. Underneath them, your awareness is clear, steady, and untouched. Trust that. Every time you choose to slow down instead of speeding up with your mind, you strengthen that trust, and you remind yourself that peace is always closer than it seems. There's something most people never realize. The thoughts you replay over and over again are quietly draining the life out of you. You might not even notice it happening because it feels so normal to carry around that background noise of self-criticism and regret. You wake up and immediately remember the thing you said years ago or the failure you still haven't forgiven yourself for. And by the time you've had your first cup of coffee, your mind is already heavy. The Buddha spoke often about how clinging to these thoughts is like picking up a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who ends up getting burned. No matter how justified you feel in holding on, the damage is always yours to carry. When you think about all the stories in your mind that make you feel small or powerless, ask yourself honestly, are these thoughts helping me in any way? Are they making me wiser, kinder, or stronger? Or are they just a habit, something you've repeated so often that it feels like truth? You don't have to pretend you're never discouraged or hurt, but you do have to decide which thoughts deserve your precious energy, because the mind only has so much space, and if you fill it with shame, doubt, and fear, you leave no room for the ideas that could actually move you forward. One of the most freeing practices in Buddhism is learning how to let go. It doesn't mean you erase your memories or deny what happened. It means you stop feeding them with your attention. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean you owe it your focus. You can acknowledge it, take a slow breath, and release it like an autumn leaf drifting away on a quiet pond. Every time you practice letting go, you reclaim a little more strength and clarity. It's true that some thoughts will come back again and again, especially if they've been your constant companions for years. That's okay. You don't have to fight them or get frustrated when they return. Just meet them with awareness. Recognize them for what they are, mental echoes, not reality. You get to choose what stays in your mind. And every time you choose peace over rumination, you prove to yourself that you are not at the mercy of your thoughts. You are the one who decides what's worth keeping. When life suddenly throws something heavy at you, a crisis at work, an argument with someone you love, a sudden setback that rattles your plans, it's so easy to slip into panic and think, I can't handle this. Your chest tightens, your mind spins, and before you know it, you're believing every fearful thought. But the Buddha reminded us that the mind is like water. When it's turbulent, you can't see clearly. Only when you allow it to settle does the truth become visible. So instead of trying to force your mind to be perfect under stress, begin by simply noticing. Notice how quickly your thoughts rush to the worst-case scenario. Notice the urge to react without pausing. This awareness is your first step toward real control. When your mind feels like it's going to break under pressure, remember that feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. Strength isn't about never feeling afraid or shaken. It's about what you choose to do when those feelings come. You can practice saying to yourself, right now I feel stress, but I don't have to become this stress. That tiny gap between feeling and reacting is where your power lives. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not just from pain itself, but from our resistance to it. So when something difficult happens, don't immediately push it away or label it as failure. Sit with it. Breathe into it. Remind yourself that no emotion is permanent and no thought is the ultimate truth. Building a mind that doesn't crack under stress doesn't happen overnight. It's like strengthening a muscle. Every time you face a challenge and choose not to collapse into old patterns, you grow a little steadier. Maybe you pause to take 3 deep breaths instead of yelling. Maybe you step outside for a walk instead of spiraling into worry. These small acts of choosing presence over panic are how you build resilience. Over time, you'll notice that situations that used to unravel, you start to feel more manageable. And when you feel tempted to think you're failing because you're struggling, recall the Buddha's words, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may." We ourselves must walk the path. That means no one else can build this inner steadiness for you. But every time you choose to respond rather than react, you're proving to yourself that your mind can be your ally instead of your enemy. This is the kind of strength that can't be shaken by any storm. Before you rush back into your day, take one more gentle breath and remember this. You are not defined by how much you achieve or how perfectly you perform. You are the awareness that holds it all, quietly steady and already whole. If you'd like to keep exploring this path of simplicity and inner freedom, there's another video waiting for you right here that will guide you even deeper. Thank you for being part of Buddhist Journey with me. May you carry this peace into every moment ahead.